Thank you very much, General. I want to jump on the comments you made about recruiting and particularly bringing people in mid-career and having more flexibility about leaving and coming back. That's a creative idea. Flesh that out a bit for me. It strikes me that that's really going to be necessary in today's environment, particularly in the technology field.
Yes, sir. We currently don't have the ability because our reserves and the Guard are in the Air Force. They're in the Air Force Reserves and the Air National Guard. So we don't have an option to, if you leave full-time active service from the Space Force, we lose your expertise. And so we're looking for anything that can allow us to retain those people who might have priorities that shift but are still willing to contribute to the service.
Do we need a Space National Guard?
So I need the capabilities that are currently in the Air National Guard. I can assure you of that. I think there's a couple of different ways to do it. We assessed 3 different options. We could leave things as they are, which I think is the worst solution because, as General Brown points out, as the Chief of the Air Force, he doesn't have organized, train, and equip responsibilities for space missions, yet he has those space capabilities in the Air National Guard. So it creates a little bit of a conundrum when I'm trying to figure out how to train forces that are aligned under the Air National Guard. So I think the status quo is the most untenable position, but there are other options, and we're going through a series of cost estimates to figure out what a preferred option might be.
Is one of them simply to sort of partner with the Air National Guard and have different units have different functions? Is that one of the possibilities, rather than set up an entirely new Space National Guard structure?
Well, we are currently partnered with the current status. So we are currently partnered to make sure we can rely on the capabilities that are in the Air National Guard. It just creates a long-term sustainment problem with the difference in organized, train, and equip responsibilities between the Air Force and the Space Force.
Let me back up a minute again on recruiting. How are you doing on recruiting, both in terms of quality and quantity? Some of our other services are having real problems with recruiting in this economy. How's Space Force doing?
Yeah, I'm almost embarrassed in front of my peers to say it, but we're doing very well. Mostly associated with the fact that we have much smaller numbers to recruit, and we have the ability to handpick those that decide they want to join the Space Force. So right now, we're doing okay. The problem is going to be sustainment over time in the quality of the applicants that we can pull in, and then retaining them for long enough to really benefit from their experience.
Turning to, you mentioned several times in your testimony, commercial assets, commercial space assets. We know that Russia is trying to jam or otherwise damage the Starlink network, which is assisting in Ukraine. Is that precedent making it more difficult to partner with commercial satellite users? One of the strategies is proliferation and using commercial satellites. Is that what's been the reaction to what's been going on with Starlink in Ukraine?
So commercial augmentation is important to the Space Force for the reasons you mentioned: resiliency, diversification of our portfolio across a broader number of participants, if you will. The Commercial Augmentation Space Reserve, we're trying to establish what is kind of like a craft, like if you know the Civilian Reserve Air Fleet that uses commercial capabilities. We're trying to, or we're exploring options to use something along those lines. I think the key with commercial industry is to make sure that the expectations are managed up front. So we're going through a series of plans, we're going through a series of industry days, if you will, to clarify what are the policy, what are the contractual, what are the legal responsibilities and hurdles that we have to clear in order to establish this so that the expectations are clear across all spectrums of conflict, crisis, et cetera.
So this is an evolving kind of capability.
It is, but I will tell you that we had significant interest. We hosted an industry day along these lines, and there were 84 participants from commercial industry. So there is interest in doing this.
Now, in my 45 seconds that's left, I'm going to ask you a question that I get asked at home. What's the difference between Space Force and Space Command?
I get asked that at home too sometimes, so I appreciate it. It's as simple as any of the combatant commands with the other services. If you were to think about U.S. Central Command and the U.S. Air Force, or Indo-Pacific Command and the U.S. Navy, for the U.S. Space Command and U.S. Space Force, we simply have different responsibilities. As the Chief of the Space Force, I have responsibility to organize, train, equip, and operate the forces that are then presented to U.S. Space Command, who has the authorities from the President and the Secretary of Defense to direct those operations.
So you're organize, train, and equip, Space Command is operate, warfight.
They have the authority from the president to conduct those missions, and they would direct our forces that are presented to them to conduct the operations.
Thank you, General. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.